Did you know that no adult Israelites who departed Egypt in the Exodus would be allowed to enter the Promised Land? In the end, even Moses himself was not allowed into the Promised Land. At first glance, this seems like a particularly harsh punishment, but today we will go over the 10 times Israel tested God, the Red Sea. Our first instance occurs at the Red Sea. After their dramatic escape from Egypt, the Israelites were trapped between the advancing Egyptian army and the sea. They turned to Moses, crying out in despair, "Was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you brought us to the desert to die? What have you done to us by bringing us out of Egypt?" This display of fear and doubt came despite witnessing God's mighty acts through the 10 plagues. Instead of trusting in the God who had shown them such power, they immediately succumbed to fear. But God, in His mercy, instructed Moses to stretch out his hand over the sea, parting the waters and allowing the Israelites to cross on dry ground, while the Egyptian army was swallowed by the returning waters. Just 3 days after the miraculous crossing of the Red Sea, the Israelites faced another test. They arrived at Marah, desperate for water, only to find the water there bitter and undrinkable. The people grumbled against Moses, saying, "What are we to drink?" Rather than trusting God who had just delivered them from certain death, they immediately complained. God responded by instructing Moses to throw a piece of wood into the water, which made it sweet and drinkable. This event was meant to teach the Israelites to rely on God for their needs. In the desert of Sin, the Israelites found themselves without food and quickly began to grumble against Moses and Aaron. They lamented, "If only we had died by the Lord's hand in Egypt. There we sat around pots of meat and ate all the food we wanted, but you have brought us out into this desert to starve this entire assembly to death." Their longing for the comforts of Egypt revealed their lack of faith in God's provision. The Lord heard them and became so angry that He destroyed the outer edges of their camp with fire. When the people begged Moses to help, he prayed, and the fire went out. They named the place Burning because in His anger the Lord had set their camp on fire. The manna, described as small white flakes that tasted like wafers made with honey, was to be collected daily, teaching the Israelites to depend on God's daily provision. Despite God's clear instructions to gather only enough manna for each day, some Israelites disobeyed and tried to save it for the next day. This manna spoiled and bred worms overnight, except on the Sabbath when it miraculously remained fresh. This disobedience showed their lack of trust in God's promise to provide for them daily. By attempting to hoard the manna, they revealed their insecurity and doubt in God's continuous care. God commanded the Israelites to gather twice as much manna on the 6th day because there would be none on the 7th day, the Sabbath. Yet some Israelites went out to gather manna on the Sabbath and found none, directly disobeying God's command. This incident underscored their difficulty in trusting God's provision and their need to observe the Sabbath rest, which was a sign of their covenant relationship with Him. At Rephidim, the Israelites again found themselves without water and quarreled with Moses, demanding, "Give us water to drink." They accused Moses of bringing them out of Egypt to kill them and their children with thirst. Their contentious attitude and lack of faith led Moses to cry out to the Lord. God instructed Moses to strike a rock with his staff, and water gushed out, providing for the people's needs. This place was named Massah, which means testing, and Meribah, which means quarreling, because of the Israelites' contentious behavior and their testing of the Lord. While Moses was on Mount Sinai receiving the 10 Commandments, the Israelites grew impatient and demanded that Aaron make them gods to lead them. They said, "As for this fellow Moses who brought us up out of Egypt, we don't know what has happened to him." Aaron complied and fashioned a golden calf, proclaiming it as their God who brought them out of Egypt. This act of idolatry was a profound betrayal of their covenant with God. When Moses descended from the mountain and saw the calf and the revelry, he was furious. He broke the tablets of the covenant, symbolizing the broken relationship between God and His people, and took drastic measures to restore order and reaffirm their commitment to the one true God. The rabble among the Israelites began to crave other food and again expressed their discontent. They said, "If only we had meat to eat." We remember the fish we ate in Egypt at no cost, also the cucumbers, melons, leeks, onions, and garlic. But now we have lost our appetite. We never see anything but this manna. Their ingratitude and longing for the foods of Egypt displayed a deep-seated dissatisfaction with God's provision. In response, God sent quail to cover the camp, but he also sent a severe plague as a consequence of their greed and complaints. After exploring the Promised Land, the 12 spies returned with a mixed report. While the land was indeed flowing with milk and honey, 10 of the spies focused on the formidable inhabitants and fortified cities, spreading fear among the people. The Israelites wept aloud that night and grumbled against Moses and Aaron, saying, "If only we had died in Egypt or in this wilderness. Why is the Lord bringing us to this land only to let us fall by the sword? Our wives and children will be taken as plunder. Wouldn't it be better for us to go back to Egypt?" They even talked about appointing a leader to return to Egypt. This act of rebellion and lack of faith in God's promise led to severe consequences. God decreed that the generation that doubted would not enter the Promised Land, but instead would wander in the wilderness for 40 years. These 10 tests reveal a pattern of doubt, fear, and rebellion among the Israelites, yet they also highlight God's incredible patience and faithfulness. Thanks for watching. If you found this video insightful, give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and leave a comment below on which story stood out to you the most. See you next time for more amazing stories from the Bible. Next week we'll explore the incredible story of King David's rise to power. Stay tuned and God bless.